I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle on a very big night from Washington. Earlier today, I went one-on-one with President Trump. We talk about the deadly shooting in Pittsburgh, the spate of pipe bombs sent around the country last week, and the push by some to connect his words with those heinous acts. We also discussed his new plans for the border, the midterms, and reports his legal team will provide written answers for Bob Mueller's investigation. But first, using tragedy to silence the president. That's the focus of tonight's angle. With midterm polls tightening in key races in favor of Republican candidates across the country and that blue wave beginning to slip away, liberals are attempting to neutralize the GOP's most effective campaigner. Of course, I'm talking about President Trump. In the last few months, he's delivered results for the American people on the economy and trade, just to name a few. And of course, he stood strong on law and order, Justice Kavanaugh, and border enforcement. But in the wake of the tragic slayings at a Pittsburgh synagogue over the weekend, some on the left have labored to blunt the Trump momentum by trying to link the president to this lunatic anti-Semite shooter. MSNBC's In Morning Joe even sought to connect the president's views on the migrant mob to the mass shooting. Now, see if you can follow this line of reasoning.
The last caravan that they whipped up frenzy about actually only brought 14 arrests by the end of the caravan. They know it's a lie. Yeah. And they are spreading hatred across America. And at the end of the day, Mika, again, inspiring people like this Pittsburgh mass murderer.
Okay. Now, if you can't follow that thinking, the idea, at least, is transparent. Tag conservatives with a gruesome tragedy and then push for the conscription, the restriction of speech that liberals find abhorrent. Now, we saw this shameless politicization in the wake of the Mandalay Bay and the Parkland shootings as well. Each time, conservatives were singled out and condemned as somehow being guilty or complicit, when nothing could be further from the truth. Now, remember when that negligent Broward County Sheriff Israel tried to blame the NRA for the Stoneham Douglas shootings?
This monster carrying bullets to school, carrying knives to school, assaulting students, assaulting his parents, 39 visits in the past year, that should never have been allowed to get that far.
And I understand you're standing up for the NRA. You just told this group of people that you are standing up for them. You're not standing up for them until you say, I want less weapons.
Now, the idea then and now is to declare conservatives toxic and tie them to a tragedy in hopes of just shutting them up or scaring them so they won't speak out. Effective conservative political speech has to be stifled at all costs, particularly Trump's. Now, this is former President Barack Obama trying to accomplish just that over the weekend.
There's nothing compassionate about ripping immigrant children from the arms of their mothers at the border and putting them in pens. Think it's wrong to spend all your time from a position of power vilifying people, questioning their patriotism, calling them enemies of the people, and then suddenly pretending that you're concerned about civility. Come on.
Now, you come on. You were the president who expanded the family detention and separations out of concerns that children were being trafficked in human trafficking. Now, that Trump does the same thing, he's depicted as some kind of monster? Give me a break. And MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell tried to go even further, attempting to blame not only the president, but his supporters for the horrific shooting in Pittsburgh. Now, that was until a congregant at the Tree of Life synagogue shut her down.
It's not just our political leaders, because we see thousands of people at rallies starting in 2016 and straight through to this weekend who are cheering hateful speech.
I really can't think of anything less helpful than to be politicizing this. I mean, this man hated Jews. He actually hated Trump, as it happens. Some people are trying to, discourage Donald Trump from coming to Pittsburgh. He should come.
Now, the president is going to Pittsburgh tomorrow with the First Lady to pay his respects to the families at the Tree of Life synagogue and to comfort the grieving, which is only the right thing to do. The very idea that the president would condone or countenance a rabid anti-Semite killing innocent people in prayer is absurd and it's offensive. He has a Jewish daughter, he's a Jewish son-in-law, and Jewish grandchildren. He has been one of the most vociferous and strong supporters of Israel that we've ever had. He relocated the American embassy to Jerusalem in the face of incredible resistance, despite the fact that all these other presidents promised to do so. And the president told me today at the White House he is undaunted by the liberal attacks and their outrageous implications. Now, the left can go right ahead, go right on with their pathetic attempts to demonize this president in the last days of this midterm campaign, but it will not work. But it does reveal their desperation. His warning of an approaching horde of non-citizens, one organized by outside political forces, is not messaging hate. It's standing up for America's sovereignty. It's what presidents should do to protect the nation and to preserve the integrity of our own laws. And the Democrats know that is also a winning political message, which is why they're stooping to use tragedy to smear the best campaign closer the GOP has ever seen. Good luck, my friends. It will not work. And that's the angle. And now my interview with President Trump. Mr. President, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura.
I know you're heading to Pittsburgh tomorrow, and Rabbi Jeffrey Myers from the Tree of Life Synagogue said last night the following.
I want to address for a moment some of our political leaders who are here. Ladies and gentlemen, it has to start with you as our leaders. My words are not intended as political fodder. Stop the words of hate.
So given his words, what do you think your role tomorrow will be and should be?
Well, I'm just going to pay my respects. I'm also going to the hospital to see the officers and some of the people that were so badly hurt. And I really look forward to going. I would have done it even sooner, but I didn't want to disrupt any more than they already had disruption. But I look forward to going to Pittsburgh tomorrow.
You said over the weekend you might even tone up your rhetoric. The media today seized on it at Sarah Huckabee Sanders' press briefing. They're pointing fingers at you, saying, look, you could do more. You're the leader of the free world. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, I did a rally, and I said, in fact, I was thinking about canceling it. I also did the young farmers, and it was great doing that. And then I had a rally afterwards. And then I said, you know, you make them too important if you start canceling. I remember Dick Grasso wanted to get the stock exchange opened as soon as possible. He did a great job. And other things. Once you start doing that, once you cancel, so you're doing a rally, and rallies are meant to be fun. Rallies are meant to be everything. And I said, tone it down. And then you saw the group saying, no, don't tone it down, don't tone it down. So we had a great rally in Illinois for some great people. And frankly, I think that's probably the way it should be. You should go about your life. You can't let these people disrupt any more than they already have, which is disgraceful. What he did is disgraceful. You can't let it happen. As far as what the rabbi said, I agree with him.
The word nationalism has taken on for the left this connotation of fueling anti-Semitism, hate, even violence. Do you think that is fair, and do you want to further clarify what nationalism means to you?
To me, I don't have to clarify. It means I love the country. It means I'm fighting for the country. I look at two things, globalists and nationalists. I'm somebody that wants to take care of our country because for many, many years, you know this better than anybody, our leaders have been more worried about the world than they have about the United States, and they leave us in a mess. Whether it's the wars, whether it's the economy, whether it's debt, whether it's all of the things that they've done, including putting in the wrong Supreme Court justices, and we've really put two great ones in. No, I'm proud of this country. And I call that nationalism. I call it being a nationalist. And I don't see any other connotation than that. Now, as soon as you make any statement nowadays with the political correctness world, they make a big deal. I'm not a globalist, but I want to take care of the globe. But first, I have to take care of our country. I want to help people around the world, but we have to take care of our country or we won't have a country, including we have to take care of our country at the border.
When you hear people use the phrase anti-Semitism to describe anything connected to you, You have a Jewish daughter. You have grandchildren who are Jewish. What's your reaction to that?
And I just received an award from the state of Israel, from Bibi Netanyahu, thanking me because I moved the, as you know, the embassy to Jerusalem, making Jerusalem the capital of Israel. And I just did that. Now, how many presidents said they were going to do it and they never did it? Many, many presidents. I won't go over the names, but I can tell you every one of them. I can tell you what every one of them said. I just opened up, and we opened it up. We didn't just name it. You know, it was going to take years and years to build, and it was going to cost over $1 billion. I opened up a beautiful building for $400,000, already opened, saved well over $1 billion. And it's opened after 4 months.
And you were criticized for that, too. You were criticized at the time, I believe, for being too pro-Palestinian, and now you're criticized on the other side.
And in fact, this horrible human being, this terrible person that did the shooting, he was not a Donald Trump fan because he said I was too close to Israel. So that seemed to be his reasoning. So I will tell you, I'm going to show you right after this, I'm going to show you the most beautiful plaque. It just came. They must have known you were going to be doing this interview, but it was sent by Bibi Netanyahu thanking me for opening the embassy in Jerusalem, which, as you know, is like the biggest deal.
The phrase enemy of the people, another phrase that's been seized upon by many in the media, many on CNN, but not just CNN. There was a woman who was just on CNN a short while ago saying that you have radicalized more people than ISIS. That was CNN today.
Well, that must be some kind of a sick woman. When I say the enemy of the people, I'm talking about the fake news, and you know it better than anybody. You have news out there that is so fake, and I can do the greatest thing ever, North Korea, as an example. We would have been going to war. Normal would have been going to war with North Korea. I think President Obama would have gone to war if he had an extra year, he would be in right now a war with North Korea. He told me it was by far, and I'm not knocking him for this, he said it's by far his biggest problem. Look at what we've done. And yet, when they talk about North Korea, they say, what's taking so long?
But you know they're going to be biased.
Yeah, but
you know they're going to be biased. This has been
going on for 70 some odd years.
Yeah.
And they say, I left Singapore, where we had our meeting, where we really had a very good meeting and a good relationship, like, what, 4 months ago. They say the new line is, what's taking so long? I say, we have plenty.
But how does it help expand your base to call them the enemy of the people? How does it help America heal in times like this?
It's a very good question, very fair. Before we finish, though, so we've done a great job with North Korea. Then they said, we can't get them on anything because the sanctions are on. We got everything. There's no missiles. We got our hostages back. We have the remains coming back, everything. So now they said, he met. The new line is,
well,
I met.
But
now, listen to this.
Why are you expecting they're going to be fair to you?
No, but think of it.
They're never going to be fair to you.
But Laura, think of it. I met. Okay, that's their new line. I shouldn't have met. So, you know, and if you go back to before I got here, it looked like we were going to war. A bad war with North Korea. So,
but I was here with Reagan. I worked for Reagan. They called him stupid, dumb, slept in the afternoon, incompetent, a warmonger, and he always kind of. He was like he had Steely, but he was
but he didn't have social media.
Yeah, that's true.
He would have fought back. He didn't have social media. When it's my form of telling the truth. Here's the problem. We have a lot of supporters. You know that better than anybody. All you have to do is look at your ratings, okay? But you know it better than anybody. Those supporters know that they're lying. I watched Meet the Press this weekend. Everything was so falsely putting words in people's mouths.
Are they trying to hobble you in the midterms because you're the best closer for this party? That's what the Republicans are saying.
They're going out of their way. And I'm getting 25,000 and 30,000 people to these rallies. Nobody's ever seen it. There has never been anything. This isn't bragging. There has never been anything like what's happening. I went to Illinois. You had to see a Boeing 747, this massive hangar, packed, and they had to use a second hangar for the overflow. Nobody's seen anything.
Yeah.
And always, look what happened for Ted Cruz, who's doing great now. We left Houston. He's now doing great. They don't even talk about that race, and his opponent is not very good.
The bomber who sent the letters to the CNN and Democrats was a fan of yours. He obviously also seems insane, completely insane. So what do you say about that? You put bomb in quotes. They went crazy over that, too, over the weekend because you used the word bomb in quotes.
Look at it.
Would you like to kind of...
No, look. He was insane a long time before you look at his medical records. He was insane for a long time. Bernie Sanders had a fan who shot a very good friend of ours, Steve Scalise, and other people. He was a total maniac. Nobody puts his name in the headline, Bernie Sanders in the headline with the maniac.
In fact, Nancy Pelosi said, do not politicize this. back at the time?
I was in the headline of the Washington Post, my name associated with this crazy bomber.
Yeah.
Trump bomber or something. But I was in the headline when they got him. They didn't say bomber found. They talked about Trump in the headline. Now, they didn't do that with Bernie Sanders when he had. They didn't do that with the Democrats when other people came out. They didn't do that with President Obama with the church, the horrible situation with the church. They didn't do that. They put my name in the headlines. It's when I say enemy of the people, I'm talking about the fake news, and it is fake.
Which
and the thing is, my people understand. One quick story. So a reporter for the Washington Post does a story that a place that I was doing, an arena, was empty. And he shows a picture. Not a very good crowd, Mr. Trump, something to that effect. And then it turned out that he took the picture 5 hours before the people started coming into the arena. The arena was packed, and there were thousands of people outside. They had to retract it. But this is the kind of dishonesty that we have.
Part 2 of my interview with the president is next. His reaction to former President Obama hitting him on the midterm trail, and so much more. Stay there. Now for more of my interview with President Trump. Can we move to some individual races? Florida, sure. Obviously so important to 2020, but important period. Andrew Gillum against Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, congressman, strong supporter of yours. Over the weekend, you called Andrew Gillum, you referenced him being a thief. What did you mean by that?
Well, the FBI offered him tickets at $1,800 apiece, and he took them. He took a trip with the same FBI agent. I guess he was posing as a developer or something. The man stone cold took this stuff. I don't even think he should be allowed to continue on with the race.
He responded today by calling you weak. You're howling because you're weak. That's what he said in a tweet.
I haven't heard that one lately. That's okay. Good. That's a change of pace. Look, here's a guy that, in my opinion, is a stone cold thief. And his city, Tallahassee, is known as the most corrupt in Florida and one of the most corrupt in the nation. He's a disaster, and how he's even close to being tied is hard to believe. But Florida can't have. If Florida has a governor like that, and I know Florida better than I know practically anywhere, Florida will become Venezuela. It will be a disaster. And you have Ron DeSantis, who is a Harvard, Yale guy. He's had a really terrific, he's a very good person. He's going to be a very good to a great governor. This other guy is a stone cold. In my opinion, he's a thief. How can you have a guy like this? And you just look at his record. Also, look at the job he's done as the mayor of Tallahassee. He's a total disaster.
John James, of course, running for Senate.
Star.
Beto O'Rourke is down on the polls since you came in Texas, but John James is only 8-9 points off his Senate bid. He's an Army combat veteran.
Right.
Why do you think he's not getting the plays by the media?
He's doing so well that I'm trying to get to Michigan. That's how well John James. John James is a star. African-American, great guy. And you know how John James, he was one of 4 or 5 people running. And I'm watching television, and I see John James. I said, who's that guy? He's running in Michigan. Let me see it again. And I said, that guy is great. He's a star. Now, I don't know, she's just a clone for, all she is an automatic vote. Debbie Stabenow. She's been a disaster for Michigan. She's an automatic vote for Schumer. John James is a young star. And I said, I'm going to back him. And I backed him. I did a little research. I backed him. And he's taken off. He ends up winning with, not a lot of money. He ends up winning the primary. And he's doing really well. He's down 7, which sounds like a lot. That's nothing, because normally they're down 25 or 30.
Obama is kind of following you on the campaign trail. He was in Wisconsin.
How are his crowds?
Yeah, Wisconsin. He's going to Florida this week. And he brought up the issue of the caravan. And he said the following.
They're trying to convince everybody to be afraid of a bunch of impoverished, malnourished refugees 1,000 miles away. That's the thing that is the most important thing in this election. Not health care, not whether or not folks are able to retire. Suddenly, it's this group of folks. We don't even know where they are. They're way down there. Don't fall for that kind of fear-mongering.
We're scaremongering people on the border.
Yeah. Well, he's trying to do the opposite. It's the problem with our country. When you look at that caravan and you look largely, very, big percentage of men, young, strong, a lot of bad people in there, people that are in gangs. We don't want them in this country. If they want to come into the country, you have to apply like other people. We have millions of people coming in. They're applying. They're coming in legally. We have a very strong border. I called up the military. This caravan is not, they're wasting their time. They are not coming into the country.
What's the military going to be able to do? Obama and Bush both sent the National Guard.
But
it had no effect.
They're not me. This is I'm sending up the military. This is the military. And they're standing there. And one thing that will happen.
No lethal force.
When they're captured, we don't let them out. What has been happening, and we're not as of pretty recently, we're not letting them out. What happens is they would catch and release. We're catching. We're not releasing. So if they want to come over, but we're not even doing that. We're not letting them into this country. We're not going to let gang members.
But what if they're applying for asylum? Isn't the law because Congress didn't change the law?
If they apply for asylum, we're going to hold them until such time as their trial takes place.
Where? Do we have the facilities?
We're going to build tent cities. We're going to put tents up all over the place. We're not going to build structures and spend all of this, hundreds of millions of dollars. We're going to have tents. They're going to be very nice. And they're going to wait, and if they don't get asylum, they get out. And very few people, they don't actually, if you want to wait, they don't usually get asylum. You know that.
80%.
The problem is they release them in, and then they have the trial 3 years later, and nobody shows up. But we are going to, unlike Obama and unlike others, we are going to take the people, we're going to put them in, and they're going to wait. And you know what? Two things happen. When they find out that that happens, you're going to have far fewer people come up. And also, President Obama separated children from parents. Nobody talks about this.
So a judge came along and said, can't do it.
He separated. No, President Obama separated.
No, in the beginning.
Okay, just so we all understand.
The New York Times is saying the military, Mr. President, being called up by you is an election year play.
We're being
invaded.
Politics
or is this real?
When you look at that, thousands of people. Somebody said, now on that one, they built it down. I'm pretty good at figuring out how many people. Thousands and thousands of people on the bridge. When you looked at that bridge loaded up with people, that's called an invasion of our country. This has nothing to do with elections. And I've been saying this long before election. I've been saying this before I ever thought of running for office. We have to have strong borders. If we don't have strong borders, we don't have a country.
Democrats are worried about the Latino vote suddenly. They're worried they're not going to get the numbers to show up.
They should be.
Why?
You know why? Because the Latinos, the Hispanic Americans have the best unemployment numbers and employment numbers in the history of our country. The African Americans have the best employment and unemployment numbers in the history of our country. Asians, best employment numbers in the history of our country. Women, 65 years. All of these things. Women have the best numbers they've had in 65 years. They should be worried.
How are you going to expand into these traditionally Democratic areas? Kanye West spent some time here.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Jim Brown.
Yeah,
they were great.
How big of an effect is West on this push for African-American support?
Well, a person came into my office who does poll numbers, said, I do not believe how good these poll numbers are with African Americans. And you see what's happened with my poll numbers. But here's what also happened. When we have the best employment numbers, the best median income numbers for all of these groups, I mean, we have the best numbers we've ever had. And I sometimes jokingly say it's going to be awfully tough to beat me in a debate when I have the best numbers ever produced. So I think they should be worried. They should be worried about the African Americans because they're going to lose them.
Will you do some events in the inner city?
I'm doing them, yeah. I already have them scheduled.
One thing that I think a lot of us are very concerned about is what's happening with the market this year. It's flat for the year, down a little bit, off its record high, both the S&P and the Dow. I know you've complained about the Fed before. How much is cheap credit globally as a part of this problem?
Well, remember this, President Obama had the worst recap that we've ever had since the Great Depression, okay, in terms of coming back. But he was dealing with zero money, zero interest money. We actually created value for money. So the people that have money in the bank and did it the way you're supposed to do it, they're actually getting interest on their money now. The Fed is being very tight. Now, in one way, you have to say that's very conservative. That's a good thing from the standpoint of conservative. I don't like it because it closes it down a little bit. But we were up almost 50% from the time I got elected, almost 50. In fact, more in some instances. And now we're down just a little tiny bit. But we have such a strong, when you go job numbers, when you go companies moving into our country, We have so many companies, big ones like Foxconn and like the car companies. They're moving back to Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida. They're coming back, and nobody's ever seen this. You've never seen it before. They left, and they had no intention. We just signed a deal with Mexico and with Canada. We did a new deal with Korea.
How about Bolsonaro? You talked to him last night. What can we expect?
He was great.
He's called the Trump of South America.
I know. I told him I'm honored. But we had a great conversation, and he's now the head of Brazil. Yeah, I could see that happening. You know, Brazil's treated us very tough because they charge very big tariffs. Brazil has been very tough. So we'll be able to straighten that out. And we have, of course, what's happening with China. China has been really hurting our country economically. And you see we're going to win that one. It's going to happen. We're going to win that one.
How confident are you about the deal?
They'd like to make a deal right now. I just say they're not ready.
$250 billion additional tariffs if that deal doesn't go through.
$250 billion and have $267 billion waiting to go if we can't make a deal.
Are you optimistic? Scale of 1 to 10?
I think that we will make a great deal with China, and it has to be great because they've drained our country. We have really helped rebuild China. They've been taking out an average of $500 billion a year for many years. Not going to happen anymore.
Who's your dream person to run against in 2020? You've already raised $100 million. Dream candidate to run against.
So far, I like them all. I don't see anybody.
Hillary's not. Apparently, she's not down and out.
I like her too. I'd be very happy with Hillary. I like them all. I don't see anybody that I wouldn't enjoy running against. And, you know, that could happen, but I don't see it right now.
A couple other questions Fox viewers really want to know. Declassifying those documents. They were kind of kicked over to the Inspector General. Why not declassify them? Get it all out.
We're getting very close to doing what we have to do. I want to wait till after the election.
Why are you and Rod Rosenstein such good friends now? It seems like everything's been settled.
I'll tell you, I do get along, but there should have never been a special counsel, in my opinion. It's an illegal investigation, totally. A lot of people agree with me. A lot of people on your show and on other shows agree. There was no collusion. There was never any collusion. It shouldn't have ever happened. But with all of that being said, I do get along, and I have made everything available. You know why? Because I have nothing to do with Russia. Hillary was a lousy candidate, and I did a very good job.
You're going to do written questions, written answers?
She didn't go to Wisconsin. She didn't go to Michigan enough. She didn't do what she had to do to win. And it's just one of those things. But we have nothing to do with Russia, and I think you probably know that almost better than anybody.
Written questions to Mueller's, written answers to his questions.
I mean, it's ridiculous that I have to do anything because we didn't do anything. But we will probably do something, yes, where we'll respond to some questions.
How's Melania doing?
She's doing fantastically, really good. She's doing a great job. Just got back from Africa, and she saw some things that were very eye-opening and tremendous poverty. Tremendous poverty. So we're trying to help.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
For your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. A bit more of our interview in the last part of our show, but next, in the aftermath of the deadly shooting at that Tree of Life synagogue, critics took aim at President Trump's rhetoric. Ahead, the Israeli Minister of Education responds.
I'm just going to pay my respects. I'm also going to the hospital to see the officers and some of the people that were so badly hurt. And I really look forward to going. I would have done it even sooner, but I didn't want to disrupt any more than they already had disruption. But I look forward to going to Pittsburgh tomorrow.
That was President Trump on what he hopes to accomplish with his visit to Pittsburgh in the aftermath of the horrific attack that left 11 dead. Now, some have suggested that the president's own language contributed to this tragedy. And even though the perpetrator hated his support for Israel and apparently hated him. Here to react, Naftali Bennett, the Israeli Minister of Education and the Minister of the Diaspora Jews, along with Joel Rubin, President of the Washington Strategy Group and former Obama Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Mr. Minister, I would like to start with you. What would you like to say tonight to the president's critics? We'll get to some of the specifics in a moment. But a message to them about their concern about his language.
Well, first of all, I came over from Israel to tell the folks in Pittsburgh that we stand united. Israel has always been under attacks, and now we've seen the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in America's history, and we do stand united with our brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism has always existed. Where there are Jews, there's always been anti-Semitism, and we need to speak up. And I believe that's what the president is about to do. What he's done, he spoke up very loudly, very clearly, saying he would fight anyone who is anti-Semitic, and that's what we would expect, and we were very pleased to hear that.
Well, what about the resistance, though, Mr. Bennett? I mean, the resistance to the president's visit, by not all, but some more progressive of Jewish leaders in the country and in Pittsburgh proper. They were even criticizing your decision to come to Pittsburgh, and I believe we have one of those. This is a tweet by David Simon, who is a Jewish-American writer. He said, "Go home. Netanyahu's interventions in U.S. politics aided in the election of Donald Trump and his raw and relentless validation of white nationalism and fascism. The American Jewish community is now bleeding at the hands of the Israeli prime minister, and many of us know it." Those are tough words, so not just directed at Donald Trump, but Bibi Netanyahu.
Those are terrible words, but they're on Twitter. They're not in reality. I spent a couple of days in Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh with the Jewish community, and all I received was warmth, desire for unity. I think the president is absolutely right as the leader of the United States to go there and visit. I'm sure he would have been criticized had he not decided to go. And I think it's time for unity and for all of us to stand together, and that's what we're doing.
Joel, let's go to you. Some of the language being tossed around about President Trump I find to be not that helpful. This is a woman named Julie Ioffe on CNN just moments before I interviewed the president. Let's watch.
I think, you know, this president, one of the things that he really launched his presidential run on is talking about Islamic radicalization. And this president has radicalized so many more people than ISIS ever did.
She came out with kind of a half-hearted apology afterward. Julie Ioffe, her name is. Your thoughts?
Well, Laura, first and foremost, I thank the minister for coming to Pittsburgh. I'm a fourth-generation Pittsburgher, grew up in Squirrel Hill. That's my parents' synagogue that got shot, so it's very personal. So for him to be there, it's positive. And political debate is part of Jewish life, and it's also part, clearly, of the community's feelings. This tweet, this statement, it reflects a real raw emotion right now. And I think American Jews in particular are very concerned about the rhetoric about how Jews are being described right now in the political environment. And we feel that that is contributing to a culture of hate that may have inspired this killer.
The reference to Donald Trump, though, Donald Trump had the chance to see this big stone plaque he received today from Benjamin Netanyahu for his work for the Jewish people. Yes. It was in the Oval Office. He had just received it. His daughter is Jewish. His grandkids are Jewish. Son-in-law is Jewish. A year ago, I think they were saying he was too pro-Jewish. He was anti-Palestinian because of the move, ultimately, of the embassy to Jerusalem. I mean, saying that he's causing a horrific attack by a man who said he despised Donald Trump.
Well, these are two separate issues. Support for Israel is not the same as what the American Jewish experience is. And right now in this country, there is deep concern. After Charlottesville, for example, where the president was not clear in his condemnation of the white supremacy, and that kind of fed into this idea that maybe the president's not calling out anti-Semitism or ethnic baiting enough. And it continues. There are many examples that make people very concerned about how we're being treated right now here at home.
Mr. Minister, your response to that, I mean, the Jewish community has been fairly, you know, more democratically aligned politically. But this is a tragedy that hits home for so many, including Joel, so many out there. Your final thoughts tonight.
I think we all have to speak out whenever anyone talks anti-Semitism, be it Louis Farrakhan, who just a few days ago compared Jews to termites, or David Duke. And I think that President Trump has been extremely supportive of the State of Israel, moved the embassy to Jerusalem, has recognized Jerusalem as our capital, has been a big friend of the Jewish people. This is not a partisan issue. It's got to be bipartisan. The president and on the other side of the aisle, everyone has to step up, speak up against anti-Semitism, and that's exactly what's going on here.
Well, we all can probably do a little bit better tonight, and I appreciate both of you being here. Thank you so much.
You.
And Lindsey Graham has been hitting the trail for the GOP senators across the country and came face-to-face with some nasty protesters in Tennessee. He's going to be here next to tell us why this exemplifies what's at stake just 8 days away. Stay there. Senator Lindsey Graham was campaigning with Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn in Nashville yesterday when a mob of angry leftists disrupted them, yelling for Trump's impeachment.
Let's take a moment and remember those that lost their lives in Pittsburgh.
Marsha Blackburn is a white supremacist!
Now, did you catch that? During a moment of silence for the Pittsburgh victims, these disgusting protesters heckled Senator Graham and Marsha Blackburn. Senator Lindsey Graham joins us now. And Senator, you say this paints a clear picture as to what's at stake in these midterms and why they're so important. I know you've been running yourself ragged, going all over the country, and thanks for staying up with us tonight. But this is a very important time for this country. Explain why you think this is so critical at this juncture.
Well, who do you want to run your government? I mean, the bottom line, what they did was rude and crude. It's the gift that keeps on giving to Republicans politically. But it's not good for the country. If you want to reward this behavior, then you get a chance a week from tomorrow to do so. If you think this is inappropriate and wrong for the country, you can vote Republican. You know, I've tried to work across the aisle. I'll keep trying to work across the aisle, but I've had it with this intimidation, in-your-face, radical left. I want to shut them down, and the best way to shut them down is to beat them at the ballot box.
Well, Senator Graham, there has been a drumbeat over the past few days since this horrific, dastardly, evil, satanic act took place at that synagogue. And we have a montage. I just want to share it with you of individuals on television trying to tag President Trump with it. Let's watch.
We have a problem. And we have a president who doesn't seem to believe he has a role to play in dealing with it.
I would put specific responsibility on the president. I think what he's done over the course of the last few years is help foment this.
At the center, an unapologetically incendiary president, untrammeled by traditional norms of civility.
Your reaction?
Again, they don't get it. I think when we win a week from tomorrow, and I think we will, I hope they understand that one of the reasons that we're doing so well as Republicans is people are disgusted with what you've just seen and heard. Nobody blamed Bernie Sanders when his supporters shot Steve Scalise, tried to kill a bunch of Republicans. Nothing Trump can do is right in the eyes of these people. Trump is not responsible for this anti-Semitic hate monger who will meet justice. That's not Donald Trump's fault. He didn't send anything through the mail. That's not his fault. It's not the left's fault when people do bad things in the name of the left. So the American people have had it with this. I've had it with it. Kavanaugh, the caravan, blaming Trump for everything under the sun. If you want to change the way the country is going and you want to tell these people they've got it wrong, then vote a week from tomorrow for the Republican Party. The only way they're going to change is for them to lose. If you want Kavanaugh to mean anything, and if you don't want any more Kavanaugh character assassinations, then you need to reject what they did and hand them the defeat they deserve. They want power so badly. The media is in the tank for them, and the only way they'll get it is for the American people to send a loud and clear signal that we're tired of you, tired of your tactics,
Senator,
and blaming every Republican for everything.
Senator, very quickly, the 5,200 troops being called up to go to the border. I understand they're going to be putting, reinforced like razor wire on the border fence.
Sure.
Donald Trump reacted to this, but Bush tried National Guard and Obama tried National Guard. We spent like $1.4 billion. We didn't get much for it. Do you think this will be different this time?
Well, name one person who's tried to solve immigration harder than I have. I've reached across the aisle, and I'm offended by this caravan trying to overrun our country. We're a hospitable nation. They're taking advantage of our generosity. We need to send a clear signal to this caravan and every other caravan that America is not going to tolerate this. So President Trump's doing the right thing to our friends in Mexico. If you don't help Trump stop this caravan, you're going to pay a price in Congress when it comes to this trade deal.
Lindsey Graham, thank you so much. I know you stayed up for us. We really appreciate it. And we break down some ugly comments from Al Sharpton this weekend about President Trump's appearance at a Turning Point USA Young Black Leadership Summit. Stay there.
Not a summit. It was a Make America Great rally. They used some young blacks as props, which really is an insult to them.
Those vile remarks by Al Sharpton were directed at the attendees of Turning Point USA's Young Black Leadership Summit, where President Trump gave a speech last week. Now, here to react is Horace Cooper, co-chair of Project 21. Horace, it seems that the Reverend Al believes that only Democrats should have the monopoly on outreach to African Americans. I found that, I've got to say, well, I shouldn't be surprised, but it was still despicable.
Not just the monopoly on outreach, also the monopoly on the use of bigoted and racist remarks with every single group. He didn't just attack Kanye West and other moderate blacks. He's attacked gays. He's attacked Asians, both Chinese and Koreans. It's his vile language that refers to people who are Jewish as diamond merchant. These are the kinds of comments that a man like this makes, and then he wants to stand up and say he should be the arbiter of what constitutes racism and what doesn't. My group, Project 21, was created precisely because we want to make sure people understand that black Americans aren't identified by our skin color. We all have individual views, opinions. We can be Democrats, we can be Republicans. He's none of those things. He's just a bigot.
To your point, Horace, MSNBC trotted out Al Sharpton this weekend to react to the Pittsburgh tragedy. Was that a wise decision given his ugly history of comments about people of the Jewish faith? Let's watch.
We must equally be outraged with the Tree of Life 11 and say that there is no room for bigotry anywhere.
No room for bigotry anywhere. Well, I would agree with him on that, but why does that not apply to some of his past statements?
I mean, here's the guy who's the poster child, not for a dog whistle, for coming right out and using the most vile and bigoted remarks, and he targets people all the time. When it was Don Imus who came on his program and wanted to apologize for the bigoted remarks that he had made, his response was, you can't be a purveyor on the national airwaves if you're making comments like this. And yet there he sits on MSNBC.
Well, a lot of corporate types like to, and they want to play nice with Al Sharpton, because if they do play nice with Al Sharpton, they won't get hauled in or sued, or they won't be harassed by him. I think that's part of it as well. But to say that black youth that were at that Turning Point Summit were used, that's an insult to their intelligence. They were there because they wanted to be. Horace, thanks so much. And what was behind this moment at the White House Halloween event yesterday? The president explains. Tonight's Last Bite, one more snippet from my conversation with President Trump today.
And you had a lot of kids. There was one moment where I was watching on video. There was this little girl. She had kind of a wand or something, and she was like, and you said, you pointed over at the press and you said, well, I'm gonna do. What did you tell her? Because
it was a snake.
Oh, it was a snake.
A cobra.
A staff.
It was a cobra, and little beautiful girl. I said, let me have that, and I looked at the press.
Well, that's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Brayman, the Fox News at Night team, take it from here. We didn't really get